unions cooperated with the Democrats, in essence, handing over our city to this special interest group and running it into the ground. So by 2008, I had enough. Actually, 2007, had enough. Fed up and frustrated, I chose to sell my companies, which, given how the markets have turned out, was a great financial decision. Great timing. I always thought going into government I'd have a pay cut, but actually 75 grand a year for a council member, compared to what's happening in the market. But I knew that I needed to focus my full-time energies on the battle ahead, which is not only figuring out how do you financially restructure San Diego with all these liabilities, but how do you fight the battles? How do you take on those special interest groups? So I ran in District 5. And District 5 is the most conservative district, great district to run it. And as I was running, the unions were trying to get Republicans to step forward and run against me. Their kind of Republicans. They promised funding, they promised endorsements, and I just kind of kept my head low and just knocked on doors. I walked 15,873 doors. Because I figured they may be able to stuff the mailbox with nasty mail, but I'm going to be able to talk to people one-on-one. My district was hit by a fire in October of 2004, a devastating fire hitting the Scripps Ranch community, which is a very high propensity voting block in my district. In the middle of my campaign, a second devastating fire hit Rancho Bernardo, my community, which happens to be the highest voting neighborhood of the district. So the unions shift gear. They decided instead of trying to run a rhino, we're going to run a fire chief. And they recruited a fire chief. And the firefighters went around and they said, if you elect Carl DeMaio, he will be disastrous for public safety. You need to elect George. That's actually his name, George. Fire chief, family man. And we just kept on our message, which is if you want better public safety, you got to reform our city's finances. If you don't reform our city's finances, there will be no program area in our budget, including fire, that will be sustained. No program area will be protected because we will constantly be paying off liabilities, debt, and constantly be feeding that pension monster. I won 66 to 34 in a primary. And we took a lot of hits from the labor unions. They did a lot of nasty things, but we kept pure to our message. And I haven't stopped since. I've gone into City Hall as the first council member in 24 years elected without any support of the labor unions. And I have been their #1 antagonist, their #1 target. And I'm proud to run the first. One of the things I'm trying to accomplish, in addition to fixing the finances in the city, is to try to change the calculation on politics, which is, yes, you can take on the bully, and you can knock him in the nose. And guess what? They're a paper tiger. The public doesn't buy their arguments. They're not as powerful as you think they are. So stand on your principles, stand up. So I'm going to talk about 3 challenges that are also going to be my 3 solutions. You can write them down. Challenge/solution number 1, standing strong. Standing strong. Not only is it a challenge, but it also is the beginning part of our party's leadership on this issue. Stand strong. Number 2, drain the swamp. Drain the swamp. The challenge is that they have all these resources, and our solution needs to be to drain the swamp. Little by little, take the resources away. And number 3, change the rules. Change the rules. They have perfected, over the past 25 years, courtesy of Jerry Brown, a system of intricate rules that are stacked in their favor. They have gotten language inserted into charters in cities and counties across the state. They've gotten language inserted into the California Constitution. They've gotten court victories, interpreting law that give them all sorts of abilities to run roughshod over public will and common sense. The rules have to be changed. Talk about standing strong. The city's financial problems would not have happened if it weren't for Republicans. Dick Murphy, Republican mayor, handed them their last labor contracts 2 months after he resigned in disgrace. And those labor contracts locked in great salaries, great benefits. Our current mayor has done a 180-degree flip on us and is now leading the call for raising taxes in San Diego by $500 million. And he's gone to the business community, and this is so funny about standing strong. Same thing applies not just politicians, but our business friends. He's gone to the business community and said, hey, I blessed this deal, so I need your support. It should be good enough for you as well. And I've gone to these business leaders and I'm saying, you can't possibly be backing a tax increase. This would hit your members. Well, the mayor said that this was good enough. Really? Did you read the contract? Did you read the proposition raising taxes? Is it good enough for you? Well, no, I'm just relying on what the mayor and his chief of staff said. I saw Chris Michelle at last night's cocktail party, and she said, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. See, I still have the cocktail napkin where she says, smiley face. What plan are you on? You are just as responsible for these bad policies and the fact that we've lost jobs because of bad policies. So let me just say, as John correctly pointed out, the Republican Party has its fingerprints all over these financial problems, which means that we have to do our penance by leading the way out of these financial problems and standing strong. We have an assembly member in San Diego that just cut a deal with the police officers union and has put the name of pension reform on his bill. And he has said, this is pension reform, it's going to save taxpayers millions. But he didn't tell you that it was written by the labor unions, and it will gut and cut benefits for our newest, youngest police officers in order to do what? To keep the fat cat, older ones instead. That's a good union boss. When you can convince your own rank and file union members that it's good for them, but at the same time you're taking more money out of their pocket and they're getting less benefit, by golly, my hat tips to you. So standing strong has to be part of the issue. Second is drain the swamp. We're going to touch on this, the fact that they basically have a taxation system for labor unions. Compulsory union dues. And it basically is required that they take the money out of people's paychecks, particularly government employees, and that all of those funds go to support candidates and causes that many of these members don't support. It's anathema to their personal values. And yet we allow for this approach, this undemocratic, unfair, predatory approach to taking people's wages and using it on political causes that they don't believe in. And finally, change the rules. Project labor agreements are coming across the state. Anti-competitive language requiring that we not bid city services out for public contract, requiring that we only use labor unions. The living wage ordinance in the city of San Diego that requires that benefits be set at a certain level, not prevailing benefits and wages, but at a certain level way in excess, and allows for any employee for a 10-year period to lodge a complaint against their own employer if they have a government contract, gives the government the ability to go in and audit. You get to keep records for 70 years and gives that employee anonymity. So you can constantly run the drill on these employers if they're not the right employer as approved by the labor union. Labor relations, there's something called the MMBA, the Myers-Browne Act, which limits our ability as elected officials to manage our city and county governments. If we go to an employee in one of the departments and say, we don't think that you're doing a good job, we've decided that we're going to transfer you to this other department, we have to meet and confer on that. We have labor relations sitting there. If we don't do something right, exactly right, the entire decision gets overturned. We got approached on our fire pits. You know, San Diego beach, fire pits. It's like, how much more San Diego can you get than a fire pit? We're broke, so we cut that by $200,000, eliminated fire pits. We had a group come to us and say, we're willing to do it for you for free. We'll do it as volunteers. Well, guess what? We have language in our labor contract that says, you shall not use a volunteer for a position that has been or could be done, potentially, by a labor union member. So I hear from people about their library, about the generosity of the community to help in a downturn. Do something like fire pit cleanup or library hours, and yet we are prohibited from doing so. And I could go on and on about the rules, but project labor agreements, the contracting restrictions, Myers-Browne Act, the labor requirements, all of these will bind the hands of even the best